I guess what we see a lot of farms that we visit, they might be doing some cropping and have some sheep and have some cows and have quite a mix. And within that, they might have a couple of different breeds of sheep and whatever. So I guess when we see the benchmarking, and I know we've actually got the data to sort of say this, is if we focus on one or two enterprises, we're actually going to be more profitable. And I guess our data actually does show that. So I guess, and generally there's some pretty good reasons why people have sheep and they might have cattle, and depending on where you are in Australia, it varies. And I guess that's been really interesting for me as a southerner to sort of go up into those northern regions where they can get rainfall, 12 months of the year. A lot of places their rainfall is the same every month of the year, and it doesn't always fall like that, but that's actually how it's averaged out over time. So you've got to have a farming system that can utilise the pasture at any time of the year.
Welcome to the Profitable Farmer podcast, where we share stories and tips to help you run a better farming business and create your very own freedom farm. If you're looking to work smarter and not harder in your farm business, welcome. You're in the right place. G'day everyone. I hope this finds you incredibly well and navigating the start to the end of our season. It's coming early for a lot of us, and I wish you well. A few weeks ago, we convened our community for a series of events. We had our 2-day alumni benchmarking summit, open book benchmarking for hundreds of our alumni members, which was incredible. We had our 2-day deep dive conference with over 650 people attending, which was amazing. 2 days dedicated to the conversation around on-farm communication management and leadership, which was incredible. And importantly, we celebrated FOA's 10th birthday with a really compelling evening celebrating the journey and where we've arrived to. But most importantly, I think acknowledging the vision that Greg and Deb and Robbo had for this project, but also thanking the first 18 inaugural members, many of whom are still with us and valued members of our community. It was a cracking few days. And so in this episode, I'm delighted to invite Tim and Cheryl Freak back, who were part of that inaugural group, have tracked with this project over the 10 years, have a freedom farm. Cheryl heads up as head coach our service and support to our alumni group. Tim is part of our analytics team. They're great examples of implementing what FOA teach strongly. And importantly, they spend more than 5, probably 7 months of the year traveling in the FOA caravan out to our FOA members and spending a day on farm with them to challenge them, to help them set down better strategy and make better choices around their future direction. And the feedback we get from the on-farm visits that Tim and Cheryl do as they tour Australia and New Zealand supporting our members is exceptional. And so Tim and Cheryl, thank you so much for all you've done for FOA over the 10 years, for the way you've supported and been part of our team and helped us make sure that our strategy and our direction is right and good. But most importantly and lately, thank you so much for your on-farm visits and for the time each year you dedicate to getting on farm to offer your incredible support to our members. So everyone, sit back and enjoy this conversation with Tim and Cheryl as we reflect with them on what they've picked up in their travels in the FOA caravan over the last 12 months. Tim and Cheryl, it was wonderful to connect with you on our podcast back in March, and it is great to see you again today. Thank you so much for your time. Tim, how are you?
Yes, going well. Thanks, Hutch, and good to connect again. Yeah, good to see you.
Cheryl, how are you?
Yes, also going well. Thanks, Hutch. Great to catch up.
Perfect. So we've just come off the back of two key events recently that I'd love to mention. Our alumni benchmarking summit was the first one, where we get all of our alumni together to get into rooms to do open book benchmarking and to help debrief and analyse and assess each other's performance. Tim, how do you reflect on our 2 days with our alumni at our summit?
Yeah, it's always a great couple of days when we catch up as a group and break up into our separate businesses where, whether it's cropping or sheep, and to have a group of 10 businesses in a room, it's been a deeper conversation about each business that we can really delve a lot deeper. And I guess the people in the group form a real connection within a couple of days, talking about their businesses and getting to share, and then acting as a boardroom, I guess you'd say. So it's always, people come away from that with lots of good takeaways, and it's just a really worthwhile couple of days.
Cheryl, how do you reflect on our 2 days at the summit?
Yeah, no, definitely lots of positive feedback from that one, or that there always is. It really is next level. It's that thing of when you're in a room full of people who have actually seen your benchmarks, understand where you're sitting financially, understanding how your year has been, and then ask questions of that group. It's amazing the depth of conversation you can have, and I think the people in the room are all so keen to try and help each other, so you get some really, really great answers and help. Very nerve-wracking for people to stand up there and present their figures, and it's really laying it all bare, I suppose. But everyone says, they just felt so supported in that room, and get so much out of it. So it's a great event, and just nice to bring all the alumni people together and all catch up. And there's generally other discussions that happen as well. So, and lots of good networking outside of the rooms. So it's always really good.
And the
good
fact
fun.
that that's done in safe environments where there's no judgment, everyone's there to help each other, the outcomes are enormous. As our head coach, Cheryl, to our alumni group, how do you reflect on what people then go away and implement on the other side of a benchmarking summit like that?
Yeah, it's really good because at the end of it, people sit down, our members sit down and identify their main actions to take, and then we put them into the CAP, which is our Clarity Action Plan that we all use as a tool for planning. And from there, the group will hold them accountable. So we've got groups that continue to maintain contact and hold them accountable. So it's just a really good way of making sure that people are prioritising the things that are most important in terms of their strategic direction, I guess, and then to have that accountability around that to make sure they move forward in that direction. And it's all about helping everyone to achieve their goals of what they where they really want to be down the track. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing to see people leave the summit and then they're away to analyse changes to their enterprise mix, negotiating differently with suppliers and banks, and having different conversations within their family dynamic. The numbers uncover a way bigger conversation than just the financial performance, don't they? And it is a great platform around which for people to then go about making positive and really meaningful change. The other key event that we celebrated was FOA's 10th anniversary, and part of that evening celebration in particular, we honoured those first 18 members 10 years ago who were bold enough to sort of team up with Robbo and Greg and give this thing a go. You were part of that, and you've tracked with our community for 10 years. Tim, how do you reflect on the 10-year celebration evening that we had, but then also how do you reflect on the journey that you've been such an incredible part of?
Yeah, it was a great opportunity on the night of the to catching up, and there was quite a few from that original group there, so that was really, really nice. And obviously there's still some people still involved, and we've got a few coaches within that first group that started. So I guess reflecting, we actually started off, our first event was actually in the convention centre, in one of the little rooms where we had an alumni catch up just the day previously. And then sitting in the big room with 600 people in the room was just quite amazing to sort of think that that's what it started out at to where it is today. And yeah, to have dreamt that would have been like that back then would have been, you wouldn't have never have dreamt that happening. But I guess it's just reflecting on that, just thinking this course is just having an amazing effect on so many people that it's, helping. It's just reaching out further and further, and we might have 600 people in the room, but it's definitely affecting so many more people. It's the children of those people, and and to see the growth that's happened, and absolute credit to Greg, Deb, Robbo that had that vision at the start to build this into something like it is today is amazing. And yourself, Hutch, joining, and Sam coming along, and Tracy, that have just kept that that vision. And it is I really feel it's really about the client and getting that client experience. And I think absolute credit to FOA directors that have really made sure, and I know Greg just keeps banging on about it all the time, that it's about the client experience and making sure they're getting served, getting everything they need. And it's so many things that they can do within the course. So it's been an amazing journey.
Thanks, Tim. And from a team of 4 to a team of 36 now, and as you say, Tim, a community of 18 to well over 800 members and more that we're working with. Cheryl, how do you reflect on being part of this team and being part of the community?
I just feel so privileged that I've been able to be part of that journey. It's been incredible to watch. And Tim said, just to, when we were sitting in that room back there with 18 businesses, and now, like you say, up to 800, it's actually quite mind-blowing. And I feel like it's helping so many people out there in terms of their farms, but also for us that are part of the team. It's just been, for us, the growth that we've been able to have, to be involved in such a special team. It's such a gift, I guess, that Greg and Deb and Andrew Roberts have given us in their vision that they had. So I feel like it would have been a very, very proud moment for Greg and Deb and Robbo. Celebration, they just to sit there and reflect on where it had come from would have been totally amazing for them. So we're just incredibly grateful to be part of it all.
Likewise, Cheryl, it's such an amazing community and team to be part of. Thank you for your part in it, both of you. You've helped us shape this, helped us stay true to what's important, and helped us consider and refine and improve every part of this business. So thank you so much for your commitment to this, and you are such great examples of what it is to do this program well and to create a freedom farm. So thank you for all of that.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and to be part of it. It does feels very special, I guess, for us to be sort of part of this whole journey with so many people that are on that journey as well.
So one of the incredible things that you do with us and for us, Tim and Cheryl, is you jump in our Land Cruiser and caravan and spend a good chunk of your year. I think you have 3 homes, and one of them is our caravan or your caravan. And you spend most of your time in any normal year in the caravan visiting our members, which is incredible. I think this year you did well over 50 full-day farm visits with our members. I think it's, typically in their second year of their 3-year Platinum Mastermind program with us. Just really keen to hear about your reflections on those farm visits, and just keen to sort of reflect with you as we sort of start in South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales. What are the threads there, and what are the lessons, and what are you seeing our members achieve? So happy for this conversation just to unfold now, but I'd love for you just to take us on your journey, if you would, on what you've seen and how your year's been travelling around across our community.
Yeah, well, I think when we talked, we were at Port Fairy last time, so obviously that's in Victoria, down the bottom of Victoria. So I guess just as thought we might sort of just work our way up through Australia from Victoria up to New South Wales and up into Queensland. And just to sort of mention that, Rick Morris did the WA ones this year, and Marina, yourself, Hutch, and Greg's done some other farm visits as well. So we're sort of spreading them amongst the community.
Sam Johnson as well. Yeah.
Sam Johnson and Sam Pincott, sorry.
Yeah,
so we've got quite a group of coaches helping out there as well. So we'd love to do them all, but we can't physically do that many now. So so anyway, that was part of our journey. But I guess just to share that, we went through Victoria, and I guess a lot of Victoria, just starting through there, we're in the sort of coming off of a drought pretty well. And at that point in time, when we started, it was just okay. It was a dry summer, no subsoil moisture. But then I guess looking, backwards from where we are at the moment, obviously the season was a late break to the season, so it was quite challenging. And at that point in time, there were so many people out there feeding sheep, and it's a really tough job when you've been doing it for such a long period of time, just feeding sheep. So probably one of the things that I really feel has been some great learnings that we can take out of some of these droughts or poor seasons is that people are setting up, confinement feeding systems. A lot of people probably did destock a certain amount, which, it's always hard to make that call. Do you destock or do you, maintain your ewe portion of your flock or whatever it might be? So, yeah, a lot of people, did a bit of both, I would say was probably the main thing. But, yeah, a lot of people have built confinement lots, which I think is, going forward, it's a really key just tool in your business. We don't want to have to use a confinement lot, but it's there if we need it. And it's a really efficient way to feed livestock, to feed sheep. So, and I guess once you've built that confinement lot, it can be doubled up as a feedlot. And I guess that was probably the other thing that we saw a lot of people doing was feedlotting their lambs and basically trying to add a bit more value to their lambs, trying to make it a bit more money. And yeah, because I guess when we look at the prices coming out of 23, 24, like some not so good commodity prices for sheep in general and probably in the cattle job as well. And wool prices had been sitting very flat at that point of time. So I guess looking, where we're at the moment, it's really quite amazing to see, livestock prices where they actually have gone, and also wool prices, the big jump just in the last few weeks, which has been great. So I feel like the people that have stuck in the sheep game are really getting rewarded, but they really deserve every cent they get, to be honest, because it's costing a lot of money to get to this point of time to hold sheep through, and the supplementary feed bills have been absolutely massive. So I think there's a lot of good learnings around that, supplementary feeding and getting the best ration. How much do we keep on farm? And a lot of areas through Victoria that we saw, but they're not used to having droughts. This is quite a high rainfall region, and it's basically happened 2 years in a row, like after a late break. So I think it really has got people thinking about their supplementary feed. How much do we keep on farm? Rather than having to buy some really expensive fodder to get it through, or do we just destock? And maybe that's about the structure of how we run our flock. So that's probably been some takeaways there. Probably the other interesting things like the composite sheep and people, nudies, merinos, and people always ask, what's the best breed to have? And I think the answer is just choose one of them and do it really well. So, but I guess what we are seeing with the composites and some of the first cross type sheep is the shearing costs that people are sort of their shearing is actually costing more than what they're getting for the wool. So I think there's been a bit of a trend towards the nudie type sheep, or that, and obviously some of the studs, like you're talking to Tom Ball the other week, and they are sort of breeding the wool-less sheep, and we're not really getting too much skin values for our sheep. So I think that's probably been maybe a bit of a change that's sort of happening over time. But saying that wool prices have jumped, let's hope they stay there. So yeah, and that's been a few things that we are seeing as well. And probably the other big one, like with these two poor seasons in the southern regions of South Australia, Victoria, is the water and people with dams. And that's been probably one of the main restricting factors for a lot of people in some of those regions, that you can buy fodder in. Buying water in is a monotonous thing. And people were doing that in some areas, buying water in. And even, I know, talking to a few of the KI people, they actually haven't had good runoff to fill their dams this year. We're starting from such a low, the soil's not that, we've had 2 poor seasons, so that to get the runoff, it's just not there. So that's going to extend into this next summer as well. So that could be challenging.
Tim, just on that, and a couple of questions. As part of our analytics team, how are you helping our members make that decision on whether to keep breeders versus sell in those tough times? What is the method by which people should be making big decisions like that? And then the second question is the confinement feeding that people are doing. When the season's correct and we're in a run of good seasons, to what degree is that an asset that can see us operate at a higher stocking rate, perhaps in the better times?
Opinion, I guess just like seeing how we have changed the management on our own farm now. Confinement feeding is basically something we'd do every year. And, if we get an early break to the season and we've got feed in the paddock, we won't use it. But for the way I see it is we actually, to make enough money out of livestock now, we do need high stocking rates when we're growing as much, during that spring, winter, spring period. So we need to have enough stock on hand to utilise that pasture. And that's the key to making money out of sheep, is utilising pasture. Growing as much pasture as we can grow, and then utilising that pasture to do the best of our abilities. And, there's different ways to manage that. Like, so it's the timing of lambing. Like, so when are we lambing? Are we maximum, when the ewes got its most needs, and we've got lambs at foot, what's our max, that's just part of it. So that's one thing to look at. Some people might be selling stock and then actually doing some trading. So trading for those peak periods to maximise that. Other people might be just saying, no, if we've got excess fodder, we'll turn that into silage or hay or a combination. So, like, every farm is different. That's one thing I can tell you from visiting so many farms, and we are all unique. And I think that is the beauty about what we do in farming. Like, it's our business. We have a unique farm. There's no black and white answer for anyone here. Like, it's about what you like, and some people like sheep, some people like cropping, some people like the mix. So we've got to find what works. But I guess you've just got to come up with your business model that, it's about maximising that pasture production for one, and then it's the sheep or the cattle or the cropping or whatever it might be. It's the tool that we use to maximise, that. So it gets down to water use, and maximising that water that falls, turning that into pasture or crop, and then the sheep turning into meat or wool is the tool that we use.
And Tim, do you see our grazing members, especially in the south, managing cost of production? I know feed costs were huge, but do you see them operating mean and lean operations and not overcapitalising, or are you seeing them actually sort of really invest in infrastructure and technology and machinery to drive that sort of production outcome? Or is it a balance?
Yeah, it's definitely a balance. I think, a few years ago when sheep were looking pretty good, there was a lot of investment into some infrastructure, and a lot of places we go now have got some good sheep yards, some good handling, like bulk handlers, all the handling gear these days. So, I think that's such an important part of running an efficient business, is that labour efficiency. And, to spend money on whether it's laneways, good sheep yards, I really think it's a fantastic investment in the livestock side of things, because, in the cropping game, we think nothing is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on tractors or machinery, to go and build a new set of sheep yards for $50,000, just go and do it. It's just chalk and cheese working in good facilities. And, you don't have to go and get the U-Butte, $200,000 sheep yards. You can do it, a lot less than that. And I guess that's my advice, is just spend your money wisely. And, we want to look at a return on investment, like with all these sorts of things. But it is a long-term investment that we're looking at when we're spending on infrastructure, especially in the livestock side of things. And, I think for people to better increase their stocking rates is probably one of the key things. And, whether it's putting money into confinement lots and that sort of thing. And, so I think that's probably some of the key points.
Thanks, Tim. And it's exciting to hear Simon Quilty speak so optimistically about sort of the sheep meat and the beef prices sort of in the medium term. So hopefully that does give our listeners some confidence to lean in and really look at those production gains that they can achieve in those times. Cheryl, do you have a comment?
I was just going to add something there, Hutch, just about the feedlotting. We are seeing lots of people moving to that feedlotting model, and I guess we see some being done really well and some not so well. And I think the difference there is how well they know their numbers. It's really important in that situation, because it's small margins often in a feedlot, and so really important to truly have a head around the numbers and make sure that money's going to be made on weight gain rather than relying on market price going up. So we went to one property who they just were all over this. They had, you know, so many spreadsheets and really all over. It was so well done, right down to they knew the cost of their dog expenses per lamb. So, you know, they'd really, you know, just finally analysing all of their numbers, and it was great to see an operation like that where they maximising every tiny little bit that they could. And that's amazing.
Just remind us about, it's the business of farming, you know, isn't it, that we've got to be great at, not just the process of farming or the function of farming. Yeah.
Well, these guys were an example of setting up a feedlot. They were a cropping business, set up a feedlot to get some extra income. And so every bit of infrastructure they had put up was for the feedlot. So they knew their overhead expenses, like, you know, compared to generally most farms we see, they're a sheep operation. They already have a shearing shed. They already had sheep yards. So these guys, you know, knew it down to the cent, as Cheryl said, about that. So they could work that backwards and think, well, if they know their sell price and they can get a contract, they know their overhead expenses, they know their direct expense, they know their feed conversions, and they know, you know, what their buy price has to be so they can make a profit. And like, it was just so refreshing to see that these guys are just so much over their numbers and you know, making really sound decisions around that. And to be honest, at the moment, their margins were slim, but they want 12 months supply, you know, to form alignments with the end users, with the JBSs and whoever. So, you know, they want 12 months supply to be able to do that. So, you know, at this time of the year, like the margins are slim, but if they can do that during the winter time, then it starts to pay dividends. So, yeah, it was really interesting to see that.
Thanks, Tim. So where to from there? Probably into the dairy part of Victoria. Is that fair?
Yeah, we did see a couple of dairies, 2 or 3, I think. So, and well out of our area of expertise. So, but it's just so good to go and see them. And of course, you know, business is business regardless of what enterprise is being run. So some of the dairies we saw going very well, but it's not all rosy. It's still quite tough. The input costs have increased in dairying, obviously, as well as everywhere else. And, you know, in the southern regions, it's been a drought, so, you know, lots of high feeding costs in a lot of cases. So it is an enterprise that is very reliant on team. And so that's one of the things we really see is how important it is to have that huge focus on team, especially, you know, we've seen a lot of dairy farmers over the years who are very, very burnt out, and the key is to get that team around them, get a really strong team around them who they have the confidence to delegate to. And I think that's often a challenge, is that delegation. So yeah, like our last deep dive, our last conference for Farm Owners Academy, the focus there was on leadership, which was, you know, is great for obviously everyone, but, you know, for these dairy farmers, they really have to put a huge focus on being able to build that team and attract and retain really good employees. And a lot of them are now getting employees from overseas, so which, you know, creates another dynamic altogether. So in terms of, you know, we can build the culture that we think's required to retain employees, but it's about really understanding the culture of the people that they're bringing in and creating the culture that, you know, will make them feel valued and recognised and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that's one of the things that really stands out to us in the dairy industry, is the importance of that ability to build a team, get a really good team around them, you know, really develop their own leadership skills and get to the point where our members in Farm Owners Academy can actually step back a little bit and get a bit more freedom. So yeah, that's been a big part of it.
The other thing we're seeing in dairy is a lot of technology, like now with the collars and that sort of things coming into the dairy industry. And it's, I think I've mentioned before, like, you know, their pasture management and understanding all that sort of things. You know, the dairy people do it fantastically well. So, but I think, you know, any dairy now they do need a certain amount of scale in their business as well, like to. Just no different to any other business these days, but like a certain amount of scale, you know, and feeding on a pad and maybe investing some capital, like to get their business to that level that, you know, they're milking enough cows. So there's some capital investment up front potentially to do that. Well, I guess what we're seeing is people are getting the dividends, you know, once they get that scale of their business and maybe looking at things a little bit differently. So I think that's been an interesting thing to see.
I think the important thing there is that, there's a good analysis done on what's going to give the best bang for buck as they, when they're looking at these decisions, because there's a lot of different things that they can be doing in terms of increasing efficiency and productivity often, but it's deciding which of those things is the first thing to do that's going to give the biggest return on investment first, and then, moving down that list.
Yep. And knowing that the payback period and the repayment period for that investment so that you can move through to the next investment quickly. Yeah. So I think you make a great point, Cheryl, that in an intensive system like that, burnout's a real issue. And lots of dairy farmers, perhaps listening, still have dairies that are completely dependent on them operationally. What are some of the things you see our members putting in place so that they can lead and manage a team? I mean, some of the things I see is designing their future org chart, making sure roles are clear, regular meetings, effective how-to processes, and all those things. Are you seeing our members really lean in to professionalising their dairy operations so that they can manage and lead it? And would you give us a few examples?
This is what I love about Farm Owners Academy, is that it does provide all of that structure in terms of how to get all of those things in place. It's really, it's follow the steps that Farm Owners Academy provide, and it pops all that structure into place that allows people to step back. So, definitely, we've got one of our coaches now has started that, they've come from having a business where they were, just completely bogged down in the business, but it was totally reliant on them. And now they are basically freedom farmers, and it's all through putting all those systems into place. So, and, there's a lot of others at varying levels of that as well. We went to one dairy where the owners had sort of stepped into the dairy with the plan to be freedom farmers. So they went straight into it, popped the team into place straight away, and had no intention of it being ever reliant on them. So you get all levels in between.
Thanks, Cheryl. Tim, I've heard you say that we can learn so much even just in grazing around how dairy farmers do it well. But what else can we learn from those intensive operators like dairy farmers that are leading and managing their team well? What can we learn from them as broadacre producers on how we do it in less intensive systems?
That's a good question. I guess it's interesting. Dairy is something that runs 7 days a week, compared to the broadacre farm. Let's say that, there are busy periods in cropping, with its harvest and setting time. So, and I think the dairies, like the ones that we're seeing doing it well, people aren't working, getting up early in the morning, then late at night and whatever. So they might be just doing one shift a day. So I think some learnings around that and how we manage that, because I think there's within, the broadacre side of things, a lot of people put in a huge amount of hours during those very busy periods. And it's always a really tricky one, because, do we employ more people and have some time off, making sure that everyone gets off, they're not working 12, 13, 14-hour days, for 6 weeks straight or 4 weeks straight or whatever it might be. So maybe, to think about that a little bit differently. So, and bringing a few more people in, it's always a balance between, obviously it costs more money, but then we want to keep it sustainable and people having a balance in their lives as well. And, it's a big challenge for broadacre croppers and that in those very busy periods. And it was like that for me. You wouldn't see your family for 6 weeks, and that's not good. So, how can we change that and make that a bit more sustainable, that we're sort of getting the job done in the right time period, but also having a bit more balance during that really busy period.
And so I think dairy farms have got almost a bigger reason to go and get those systems in place, because their systems are so intensive. But I guess my bias is that those same systems, the meeting protocols, the org charts, the job descriptions, the career pathways, the policies, the procedures, the how-to videos, they're all just as important in a broadacre environment if we want to actually create a business that's less dependent on us as they are in an intensive dairy system. Cheryl, do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, dairy farmers are probably much better at it in terms of seeing their team as an investment rather than a cost. And so, certainly, on our journey, we, would just, buy another property and then go head down, tail up and try and do it ourselves. Whereas, that idea of employing as an investment and then treating it as an investment, just makes such a difference.
So then where to from dairying and Northern Victoria?
Yeah, I guess we travelled up through New South Wales, and you don't realise how big a state New South Wales is, and so much agriculture within. I actually love New South Wales going through there. So it's very diverse, and obviously changes from east to west as you sort of rainfall wise as you go through. But really enjoy staying like at a lot of places. Quite often camping on a river through New South Wales, so it's a really nice place to go through, and lots of nice national parks to go and visit. So that's been good. But probably the cropping and like the irrigated and dry land cropping side of things, and I guess it's been interesting to sort of see like people. Like we're a bit of a repeat of last year, just about with the dry start to the year, a late start, not too much subsoil moisture for a lot of places. So there's a lot of dry seeding going on, which I think is, when I look, just from our own experience here, the dry seeding side of things now, the crops are that much better, and utilising every little bit of moisture that falls on your property when it rains. So it's chalk and cheese between, people that might wait a bit longer. And, it's not always, the answer to butter dry seed, but, we're seeing a lot of that. I guess the challenge in broad acre and irrigated cropping now is that as our costs of production, that probably no need to tell everyone that, we're all seeing it. So the margins are getting slimmer. And I guess just to, we always talk about with our benchmarking, working on a average yields, average prices, 30% net profit in your business. So I guess when we talk about a net profit, that's our income, less our direct expenses, less our overhead expenses, leaves us with net profit. And then we take out finance after that and leases and that sort of thing. So, and included in those overheads are our depreciation, so our machinery cost and whatever there. So,
and our owner's wage and our employed wage as well, yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So thanks such. So so that is the challenge at the moment. And I guess just a few of my conversations with people doing the debriefing, and people have had share farming agreements that have been serving them quite well over the time. It might be a 70-30 or something like that. So whereas we look at that now and it's actually not serving them like with a 70-30 arrangement, because the margins are that slim. If they give 30% to the landowner, there's nothing left. And I guess we've obviously seen fertiliser prices go up. Chemicals aren't too bad, but like when we look at the overhead expenses, everything, whether it's insurance, council rates, water, electricity, they've all gone up, quite a reasonable percentage. But probably the biggest challenge that I'm seeing is the cost of machinery now. Since COVID, it's gone crazy. And, you buy a tractor for $1,000 a horsepower, per horsepower. That used to be the old model, but now it's probably nearly double that. So that's the challenge. And we can only keep our machines for so long before we actually do need to replace them. So and that's what a lot of conversations around is, how long do we keep these machines for now? Like sometimes people might have kept them on for until they've done maybe 1,500, 2,000 hours. Now they're thinking they'll take them to 3,500 hours. So that's some of the strategies, but you still have to replace them at some point in time. You can only pan that out so much. And so the conversations around that and how we do that, and really a lot of that gets down to cash flow management, because I guess what we've seen, people did have some good years back, early 20s, bought some nice machinery and, things that they've been needing to do for a while. And now a couple of tough seasons, the cash flow is the problem that, they're paying them off. So, and I guess there's a bit of talk, and I know you've talked about this with Jeff McDonald before about, maybe using balloons that we can actually spread that cost out a bit further. And that's purely for cash flow reasons and to think about how we manage that. So, it's a challenge for everyone. But I guess just as far as what we've seen, probably throughout Australia, this year's panned out, like I said, very much like last year. But WA's had a really good year last year, looking fairly good in most regions. Northern New South Wales and Queensland were good last year. Once again, they're looking pretty good. And I always find it interesting in the northern New South Wales, Queensland area, where they've got an opportunity to summer crop and winter crop. I find it a really interesting system because it allows them to spread their machinery costs out over more area that they don't have to get the crop in all in 4 weeks at the start of start of May potentially. So they can spread that machinery cost out over two planting periods, and the same with a harvesting machinery as well. So, and then if they do miss out on one, there's a pretty good chance they'll get a rain in another time of the year, so they might better make the most of the summer crop opportunity. So I'll find that a really interesting system. I guess for me, learning about that coming from a southern farming region, really interesting to see that. Probably have farmers that have done really well, people that had full hay sheds in the last few years, and because hay prices have done very well, and people with hay production, and obviously we've got some irrigated farmers there that are growing irrigated, whether it's lucerne or whatever. They've been rewarded for that industry. The hay prices have been extreme, I would say, in the last sort of period of the year. So that's a win for them. Probably not so much for the people that are buying this expensive fodder, but you could have a few wins along the way, so you mark them up. And probably the other thing with irrigation is the water, and obviously I'm amazed there's so many different river systems within Australia, and every single system has got a different set of rules. So, there's no chance that you can understand them all because, they're all so different. But I think the ones sort of further south are facing some challenges with the lack of water and the reservoirs and dams that are probably not so full now. So that, water. But I guess what we're seeing with the irrigated cropping is that the water might be expensive, but so they have to grow the highest value crop that they can grow, and really sort of making sure that they're maximising that. And some of the people with the irrigation, they really understand exactly what that cost of the water is. They've formed an alignment. They might know the price for the end user, so they can really work it out to how much that's actually costing them, and they know that they can be profitable if they grow their good average yield. So, which has been interesting.
Tim, really appreciate those insights. Do you see people, as a general rule, still justifying an investment in new plant? Are you seeing any change their policy toward, the second-hand machinery market, or are you seeing people continue to make that investment but then just to retain those machines for a longer period? Like, how are people navigating that increased sort of investment up front in plant?
Yeah, it's a really challenging one because we see it all within Farmers Academy. We see the people that are buying the new machinery and there's a certain amount of farms, and there's probably not that many that actually have a big enough scale to think about. If you think about a header now is over $1 million, SP Boom, same, a seeding setup, same. So I guess when we look at some of the KPIs, where our KPIs, if you had $1 million worth of machinery, that'd be $1 million worth of income. So, you think about just a few pieces of plant I've just listed off, that's $3 million straight away. So you need to be spending over $3 million worth of machine of crop, for that. So, and that's just getting more and more of a challenge. So, a lot of farms just don't have that scale. So our farms, an example, we try and buy good secondhand, and everyone's trying to do the same thing. And I feel like we really haven't hit this next challenge yet because the new market's gone up so much. A good secondhand tractor or whatever it might be is going to be $500,000. So, how do we sort of keep the balance of that going forward? So I feel like we're in a little period at the moment of everyone's just sort of padding things out. And this is going to be the next big challenge, I feel, with the cropping side of things, is how we do that. And a lot of people are going down the track of just keeping machinery longer, really, and maybe fixing it up. And everyone has a different view on that. If you just don't like fixing things, you got to pay the dealer to do every single thing that you do. That gets very expensive as well. So, whereas some people are, they're good at fixing stuff, so they go down that track. So, everyone's different, and there's no set rules around that. But I guess just back on the benchmarking, I was just sort of thinking that what we're seeing now with our benchmarking is, we're seeing, within the group, there's some people that have had above average seasons, and they are achieving this 30% net profit that we talk about. So to achieve that now, you have to be above average. And I guess what's happened, this, leading to this harvest, all commodity prices have actually come back quite a bit. And, we're looking at lentils. It's been a really profitable crop for a lot of people when they're at sort of $800, $900 a tonne. Now we're back at sort of, 600, say. And if you don't get the yield, that's becoming a lot more challenging. So I feel like our direct expenses, they haven't changed. Potentially fertiliser prices going up this next year is what I'm hearing. And our commodity prices have come down. So a lot of people are going through this period and just having to pretty well pull their head in for a little while and sit tight and just get through, because it's all cyclical. That will change, no doubt. There'll supply and demand, but I think we just need to get through this period. And I think what I'm seeing is the good farmers are still just really being really thoughtful with all their decision making on how they go about this.
I think at the moment it's a matter of being really focused on controlling what you can control. So, and that is things like the timeliness and, getting the best quotes for input prices and all those sorts of things is quite a bit out of our control at the moment, but just staying focused on what we can control.
Great comment, Cheryl. Tim, while we speak about the benchmarks and what that's telling us, would you mind speaking to the TP LMC benchmark and maybe having our listeners using that as a guide to help navigate some of those investment decisions?
Yeah, so TP LMC, so GRDC did some research back a few years back, and with all farmers, around Australia, a group of farmers around Australia. So TP is total plant, so that's depreciation. L is for labour, M is for repairs and maintenance, and C is for contracting. So if we look at all those things, so when we talk that, we say, what is that divided into net income? So what's their total income? And the average around Australia was 34% of those expenses. And that was the average. And their data is that the top 20% were under 25%. So that's obviously relative to income. So we've got to keep that in mind. So what would average look like for us? So, and I guess the reason for that is some people, they might have more brand new farm machinery, so their depreciation figures and finance is going to be a lot higher, compared to someone that goes down the second-hand track, and their R&M might be a lot higher, or the scale of the machinery, there might be more labour involved. So I guess that's a way. And then I guess the other one was contracting. So some people might choose to use all contract. So it's looking at the mix of that and how we sit within that mix. And sometimes, a lot of farms, it's a combination of those things, and that's probably something that a lot of people are going to have to look at going forward. Is maybe we don't go and buy the $1 million header, and we can use a contractor, or maybe we might get that machine, syndicate it and use it with another farmer, because the capacity of these machines now is huge. So maybe we have to think about this a little bit differently about how we do that, because most people just do not have the scale in their businesses to justify that. And I guess that probably leads into the next bit of the conversation is, the scale of a business and how people navigate that to help them make some of those machinery decisions, because I guess what we see a lot of farms that we visit, they might be doing some cropping and have some sheep and have some cows and have quite a mix. And within that, they might have a couple of different breeds of sheep and whatever. So I guess when we see the benchmarking, and I know we've actually got the data to sort of say this, is if we focus on one or two enterprises, we're actually going to be more profitable. And I guess our data actually does show that. So I guess that's a lot of our conversations with a lot of people, and generally there's some pretty good reasons why people have sheep and they might have cattle, and depending on where you are in Australia, it varies. And I guess that's been really interesting for me as a southerner to sort of go up into those northern regions where they can get rainfall, 12 months of the year. A lot of places their rainfall is the same every month of the year, and it doesn't always fall like that, but that's actually how it's averaged out over time. So you've got to have a farming system that can utilise the pasture at any time of the year. So it's very, very different to down south. And so cattle fit into that really quite nicely, because, if it rains in the summertime, you've got perennials there, they've just grow. You can never have enough livestock to utilise that pasture. So it's very, very mixed. But, if we're down south and we've got a sheep and cropping, and I guess the way I like to look at it and the way I have these conversations with people is, you look at that 1 hectare of land, what is the most productive thing you could be doing with that 1 hectare of land? And Obviously, my conversation a year or two ago was cropping was making a lot more than sheep, and that wasn't looking very good. Maybe that's changed a little bit at the moment. But we do need to take the long-term view of that. And obviously, we're looking at probably decile 9 and 10 prices for sheep at the moment. So we can't budget on that. So it's more about thinking about, if we've got some unarable country that's not so good for cropping, well, maybe that's a better focus for livestock and keep our cost of production down on those areas and not, put in, if we're cropping now, we need to be maximising every input that we put into it. So a lot of these conversations are around, what is the mix that we have got on our farm.
Sometimes we sit down and we look at what's the opportunity cost of the enterprise that they're currently running there versus, what they could be doing, and just, really put some numbers around it and just go, what's the difference there?
And I think it just highlights the importance of having diverse perspectives. We can sort of get stuck with the enterprise mix that we've got, but bringing people like Tim and Cheryl and other mentors and coaches and advisors onto your farm to actually just look at your enterprise mix and your business model with a fresh perspective and ask some new questions can be the thing that can change everything. And I think that just sort of is an acknowledgement of the impact that Tim and Cheryl have when they come on farm and just offer a fresh and a different perspective. But just to speak, Tim, to your point, and for our listeners, at FOA, we measure scale as revenue, not area. And so when you've got 3 or 4 enterprises competing for resources, land, labour, plant and other, it could well be that none of your enterprises actually are at scale enough to be able to be efficient and profitable and effective. And what our benchmarking data is telling us, that it's the businesses with 1 or 2 enterprises typically that are the ones that are achieving that 30% profit and that 4, 5 or 6% return on assets managed, because they're achieving scale in 1 or 2 enterprises rather than trying to navigate the complexities of 3 or 4 or 5. Tim, is that sort of another way of saying what you've just described?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just a quick one on the return on assets managed there. Like, the benchmark we just look at was like 5%, and that is, you won't do that in an average season in most areas now of Australia because the land values have gone up. That's been, we're back at between 2 and 3%. So that's probably something to get that. It's got to be above average. We do see that in some more marginal areas that have a good year, but like if you look at their average over time, they're probably not going to achieve that over time. They'll do it when they have a really good year because their land values are lower. But I guess that's the thing, and I guess that sort of relates back to lease values. That the benchmark used to be, you pay 5% of land value. That's really back to between 2 and 3% now. So that's if you're paying a lease of 2 and 3%, like to get a return of 2 and 3%, like so, I was talking about share farming before. Maybe and leases is the same. We just cannot pay too much money for a lease now because the profitability just isn't there. So that's a bit of the challenge there as well.
To Cheryl's point too, that's the people that know their numbers around the return they're getting on that leased land or that share farmed land are the ones that are making really commercial and astute decisions around whether they continue or renegotiate.
Yeah, well, there's still opportunities, I think, with that scale side of things, and leasing at the moment probably is a good opportunity if you can get it at the right price. And I guess the people's view at the moment, like that land values have probably gone up a huge amount in the last few years, generally plateaued, even come down in some regions. So leasing is not a bad option because when you're leasing, you're obviously not getting capital growth in the land, comparing to buying. So we are having a lot of conversations around, if you want to scale your business, which obviously means more income, but you're going to need more land to be able to do that. That's an opportunity there, leasing at the right price. Saying that.
It's interesting that there's still very much a mentality that when the farm comes up for sale next door that you have to buy it though, because everyone thinks, well, we do have to scale, and so we have to buy the farm next door if it comes up for sale. And the thing that we would always look at first is have you got the business model right first on the land that you're farming? There's no point actually buying the property next door if that isn't right yet. So yeah, and yeah, I guess it's just about getting people to open their mind up to that that's not the only only way to go is buying more the land next door and, thinking about off-farm investing and that sort of thing instead of necessarily scaling within farming.
I like the construct of the 3 plates spinning that we talk about. The first one we've got to get right is our business model, and we've got to be pursuing 30% profit on average with the business model and the farm that we have. And that's the best focus until we get to that. And then we can focus on getting our gearing right so that we can scale. But I think I love that construct of those 3 plates spinning and just making sure that we're not expanding too early before we get our business model and gearing right on the asset that we have. So it's a key point, Cheryl. Thank you.
Yeah, it has got a lot of people into it, a lot of trouble scaling too soon.
Yeah, before you've got your core business model firing. Absolutely. So just more broadly, perhaps, how do you reflect on the year that you've had? The opportunity to travel across Australia and to get on farm and to meet with some of our amazing families, but just, I guess, more importantly, just to be that fresh perspective, to challenge people with really thoughtful business and personal and family and other questions. How do you reflect on the visits that you've had and the conversations you've had and the impact that you've had?
Like I said earlier, we feel very, very privileged to be part of it all, and to be doing this is amazing. I think, like you said, coming in with an outside perspective, people do tend to get, really focused on their business and what they're doing, and sometimes it's hard. And I know we've been there. Like, it's hard to lift your head up and take that broader picture view. And so I think that's the advantage. Like, we come in, we can look at it with fresh eyes, and we often see things that they're not seeing that can be quite easy tweaks and things. I think the other thing is, and this is one of the things I love, is that we can come in and we can see the wins that people are having. People get very focused on, where they still have to go and the things that have gone wrong, whereas we can come in and the first thing that often stands out to us is all the wins that they've had along the way. So, often that's one of the reflections from the members that we go and see, is that it was just a real reminder to stop and celebrate their wins. So, and I feel like the other thing that, if it was all about us just coming in and going, right, how are you going to make more profit? It wouldn't do it for me. I think, for me, it's about, I just love to see people be happy, I suppose, and to be able to look at the whole farm and the whole business and family and relationships and all that sort of thing, and just help people remember what's really important to them and help them to be okay and feel okay, almost give permission to focus on the things that are actually important to them and, not lose sight of that.
How helpful is it for a family to have a clear 2 or 3 page clarity action plan that can align them to a common direction? That tool in particular, or specifically, how do you see that when people leave, or you leave their farm and you've helped them refine their plan? How do you see that helping them?
I think the really important thing there's lots of parts of that clarity action plan, but it's about coming up with that aligned vision at the start, coming up with a vision that the whole team are aligned to. And I think, often people will put down and they'll say, their vision, their big goal is they want to make $10 million or whatever it might be. We'll always go, yeah, but why? What's the why behind that $10 million? What's that going to mean for your life? And so it's that chance as a team to really reflect on what is just the most important things, and why are they heading in the direction why are they doing what they're doing? And so I think there's that part of it, because there's so much power once you're all focused on the same goal. And then, to be able to stop and think about, all right, so we want to be there in 10 years' time. What do we need to do in the next 3 years that's going to be heading us in that direction? And then what do we need to do in the next 12 months that's going to make sure we tick off all our 3-year goals? And what do we need to do in the next 90 days that's going to make sure we tick off our 12-month goals? And just to be able to stop and this is all thinking of the strategic direction that they're wanting to head, to be able to stop on a regular basis and have a look at that and just go, these are the things that are priority that are going to get us to that 10-year goal. These are the things that are priority in the next 90 days and ultimately will get us to that 10-year goal, is incredibly powerful. So, and I think we come in and we can just help a little bit in terms of helping people determine what some of those things are, but also to prioritise, where do they fit in amongst all of that.
Thanks, Cheryl. So many of the farms that you've arrived onto, they're generational farms. They might be second, third, fourth, fifth, even sixth generation farms. We can be the best custodians of the farms and see them drive towards real efficiency and performance. But also there's challenge and complexity that comes with family business. What's your reflection there, Cheryl, on some of the complexities and some of the challenges perhaps of being a generational farm?
Yeah, there's definitely challenges that come with it. I guess looking from the outside, we probably all think, oh, wow, lucky people, they've been handed a generational farm. However, when we start to dig a bit deeper, sometimes it can actually be a real ball and chain for people. It can actually hold them back. We see some of the first generation farmers come in and, they're out there, they're taking risks, they're really having a crack because they've actually got nothing to lose. Like they've started with nothing. They, if they walk out the door, have a go and leave with nothing, they actually haven't lost anything. Whereas these generational farms can sometimes really hold people back because there's that fear of losing that farm. And I guess the other thing we see is that sometimes because it's been in the generations for years, sometimes the succession side of things has meant that it's got smaller and smaller because it's had to be subdivided each time. And so it gets to a stage where it's actually not a viable size. And so then you've got people who are struggling to keep this generational farm going, plus they often have to still support the parents. Farms often run down because the previous generation hasn't had the capital to put into it. They've been living off of the equity. And so, when we come in, sometimes it's about just really re-looking at the model of what they're doing, just trying to come up with something completely different really tweak the models to make it something that can actually make money, which is quite difficult. Like, for example, if it's been a sheep stud for years, there's a lot of tradition that goes with that, and things like that can be hard to give up. So yeah, there are complexities. Sometimes there's people there who actually don't even want to be there, or sometimes they're on a sheep property and they'd rather be on a cropping property, or vice versa. There's a few challenges that go along with the generational farm.
Cheryl, what's the opportunity there if there was to be a significant fresh perspective that arrives to that family? What are some of the considerations that perhaps they should give a bit more priority?
I think it's about taking a completely fresh look at it, which is really hard when you've got all of the stories of the past generations, or all the past generations looking over your shoulder. Yeah, often it needs a very fresh look to see what could be done here, and just because it was being done for the last 10 generations doesn't mean that's how we have to continue to do it. We've seen some generational farms who are making that really tough decision to actually sell. And that, while it's a very tough decision, sometimes it can be the bravest and kindest decision because it's kind of frees the next generations. So yeah, I think we've just got this thing where we feel like we have to, you have this generational farm and you've got to hand it on to the kids, or even, people that are not so much generational farms. There's often that thing where we're just really striving to hand an empire onto our kids and often sacrificing everything along the way to do that. And we can see sometimes on these generational farms, sometimes on these others that are striving to do that, it can lead to resentment from the parents towards the children of the next generation if they start to have it easier than what we had it too. So there's a lot of complexities tied up in it, I guess. And we often really encourage that older generation to make sure they look after themselves first and look at getting themselves set up and allowing their kids to have their own journey. Like, we don't have to put them at the finish line. Yeah, and even like the whole concept of leaving a legacy, like we feel like we'd want to leave a legacy, and for a lot of farmers that is leave a farm or leave a significant amount of wealth. Whereas we often challenge the thinking around that too, and just encourage them to think differently. And like leaving a legacy can be, showing kids how to live a life of purpose and fun, or just really enjoying what they're doing, or it can be providing kids with an education that allows them to be able to run their own business down the track. If they're given an education in business, that's fantastic to leave the kids, or to help them to develop a great mindset so that they can just handle whatever comes up in life. So, in my mind, a legacy doesn't have to be the farm, I guess.
Oh, there's some really important philosophies and constructs in what you've just shared, Cheryl. I think so many of us spend so much time thinking about these things. But I think for me, what would be really compelling is for our listeners to think, well, who do I love and trust who I might get around me, so that we can kind of formally have some of these conversations and come up with a philosophy or a method by which we are going to navigate these constructs and set up for succession or whatever it is. I just think they're wonderful conversations that you get to have with farming families. And I think it's really healthy that we are challenging the status quo perhaps, or, the way that it's been. There's two books that come to mind, Cheryl, as you talk, that what got me here won't get me there. And Tim, that links to, I guess, a lot of what you've talked about as well. But there's another book that one of our members gave me the other day, which is Die with Zero, which talks about just living life fully and thinking beyond the wealth that you might leave for the next generation. It's about what's the more intangible legacy that you want to provide in supporting the next generation to thrive in their own way. Such important constructs. Tim, what's your comment on this?
Family businesses are very complex, and I think it's about communication is the number one key here, and starting from a very early age, and so that we're all open, having these open conversations. It's not it's not an event. It's what's happening over time, and I really think the older generation showing leadership in these situations, and not burying your head in the sand, I think is just a really important factor, and whether that's the transition of management and succession and all that, and showing that leadership, I think, is such an important part to play, because we do see a lot of, like, the older generation are the roadblock in the business, and as much as we don't probably think we are the roadblock in the business. So how do we not be that roadblock and let this younger generation come along? And things are different, like things are changing. We have to farm differently and be open to change. And I guess that's probably one of the biggest things that we see within FOA is being open to change and getting the mindset around that we can change and we can do things differently. So yeah, I feel like people that we work with are generally very open to change. So that's a privilege to work with these people, and they are being proactive in this space.
Tim, I think to your point, and just to the elder generation listening, succession is a leadership challenge and issue, and I think it is your responsibility to lead, for the betterment of all family members. So I think that's a point really well made. On behalf of all of our members and our whole community and our team, we are just so grateful to you both for dedicating more than 7 months of your year to be in a caravan, travelling around, making an impact to the lives of so many of our members and their extended families. I know our members get so much value from it, Tim and Cheryl, and the impact you have when you drive up those driveways and sit with them and question them and offer that fresh perspective. They value it so highly. So on behalf of us all, thank you so much for FOA's farm touring.
Thanks, Ashwa. We love doing it, and we love doing it together. And if we can just help people on part of their journey on just a little bit, that's we're happy.
So two questions for you just to finish. On the farm visits, what are you most proud of? And secondly, what's your one tip reflecting for our listeners, reflecting on the touring that you've done? Cheryl, can I ask you to speak to that first?
When we see people's faces change from when we walk in the door and they're looking incredibly stressed, uptight, and then we walk out the door and their faces are much more relaxed, and I think that they're realising that they're actually doing a good job. Like we're very isolated in our farming, and yeah, sometimes you don't realise how well you are doing until someone comes in from outside and can share. So for me, I think that's what I'm most proud of. Like Tim said before, being family farms, it's tricky, and I think perhaps setting the intention that you're going to be successful in both family and farming is a real key. So, making sure there's a focus on doing both well. I did see a quote a while back, and it was an article, and it was talking about what's real success in business. And it talked about having a formula that real success is, this was what they used, but it was profit times harmony times fun times being of value times trust. And said that if there was a zero anywhere in that equation, then the end effect is no real success. So, and it's saying, like, you put your own drivers in that, but if you can have some sort of equation like that where you just know that, we need to keep a focus on all of these things and make sure there's no zeros there, and end up with a very successful family-run business.
Can you just give us those again, just to finish, Cheryl?
So this is just an example, but profit times harmony times fun times being of value times trust
equals success. Perfect.
Equals
I think you're right. For people to come up with their own equivalent of that would be compelling. Thank you, Cheryl. Tim, what are you most proud of, and what's your one tip based on your travelling?
Yeah, I feel really proud that we can just help people. And that's just a privilege to be able to help people. And it's probably about giving them just the confidence in what they're doing. And that's generally what it is just seeing what they've achieved so far. And we walk out the door, and like Cheryl said, they're just sort of standing a bit taller and saying, hey, you guys actually are doing a good job. What you've done is amazing. Obviously, there still might be a lot of work to do, but it's just giving people that self-confidence. And yeah, I feel really proud that we can walk out and we've just helped people. That's like I said, it's a real privilege to be able to do that. So, and probably the tip, it really is so much about communication and doing this as a family together and just talking. And communication is such a key component here on how we do that. And part of that, it all sort of leads into leadership and how we lead from the front within our business as well. So I think probably communication is probably the biggest tip, is just, get these conversations happening, as much as they might be really hard sometimes.
Amazing way to finish. Thank you so much for everything you do, Tim and Cheryl, and thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Hutch.
Bye for now. And there you have it, everyone. Amazing to catch up with Tim and Cheryl. We value you both so highly. There's some wonderful insights there for our sheep and cattle and dairy and irrigated and mixed farmers and dryland croppers as they've done their tours. I hope you found that helpful, and also some reflections on the questions that we might be asking ourselves as we navigate families and family business on farm and constructs like intergenerational change and succession. Tim and Cheryl, thank you so much. Great to connect with you. And to everyone listening, I hope you found that of real value. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Profitable Farmer podcast by Farm Owners Academy. If you're new to this show, be sure to follow us. If you've been a long-time listener, let your friends know about us, or come continue the conversation in the Profitable Farmer Facebook group. All the best as you grow your business and create your freedom farm. Until next time, keep being incredible.